October 24th, 1942, 2 a.m., Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The jungle breathes with 1,000 unseen threats. Private First Class Mitchell Paige wraps his fingers around the butterfly trigger of his water-cooled Browning M1917, feeling the weapon's familiar weight through the tripod. Sweat mingles with condensation from the oppressive humidity, making his grip slick. In the darkness ahead, palm fronds rustle, not from wind. There is no wind in this suffocating night, but from movement. Human movement. They're close. Closer than any enemy should ever be allowed. Paige can make out shadows now, mere yards away. Japanese soldiers picking their way through the undergrowth, confident in their approach. His finger hovers over the trigger. Every instinct screams to fire, to cut them down before they get any closer. But the orders were clear. Hold fire. Wait. Let them come. The metallic taste of adrenaline floods his mouth. Around him he senses, rather than sees, his fellow Marines, each man fighting the same primal urge to shoot. Their breathing comes in controlled, measured draws, the only sound they allow themselves. The Japanese have no idea they're walking into a carefully prepared kill zone. No idea that their supreme confidence in night fighting is about to meet American industrial firepower. The Japanese soldiers creeping toward. Paige's position carried more than rifles and grenades. They carried absolute certainty. For decades, the Imperial Japanese Army had perfected the art of night combat, turning darkness into their greatest ally. Their training manuals proclaimed it with religious fervor. The night belongs to the Japanese soldier. In darkness, 1 Japanese warrior equals 10 enemies. This wasn't empty propaganda. In China, Japanese night attacks had shattered defensive lines thought impregnable. In Malaya, British forces had crumbled under moonless assaults. Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, fell after Japanese troops emerged from darkness like phantoms. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki, whose regiment had been first to breach Singapore's defenses, had sneered at intelligence reports about American Marines on Guadalcanal. The Americans will collapse at the first taste of Japanese steel, he'd declared to his officers. They are factory workers playing at being soldiers. They rely on their machines because they lack the warrior's spirit. The Japanese military doctrine was built on this foundation. Spiritual strength could overcome material disadvantage. Their soldiers trained to move silently through jungle darkness, to navigate by instinct, to strike with the sword when ammunition ran low. American firepower meant nothing if the Americans couldn't see their targets. And in the suffocating darkness of Guadalcanal's jungles, the Japanese believed they were invisible. Captain Toshiro Sakai, advancing with the 2nd Battalion, had written home just days before. The Americans make noise like water buffalo. They fear the dark. When we come for them in the night, they will flee as all white men flee before the sons of Yamato. He moved through the jungle now with 800 fellow soldiers, supremely confident that dawn would find them in control of Henderson Field. They had no idea they were walking into Chesty Puller's trap. But Lieutenant Colonel Lewis, Chesty Puller, had been watching. 24 hours earlier, on October 23rd, the first Japanese probes had begun. Small groups of enemy soldiers testing American lines, melting back into the jungle before Marines could effectively engage. These weren't the wild banzai charges Americans had come to expect. These movements showed discipline, patience, reconnaissance. Marine observers stationed in forward positions reported something unusual. Corporal James McHenry whispered into his field phone, "Sir, they're not attacking. They're counting. I can see them pointing at our positions, making notes." From multiple observation posts came similar reports. The Japanese were mapping American defenses with methodical precision. In the command bunker, radio operators intercepted fragments of Japanese communications. The translations were chilling in their confidence. American positions are thin. Machine guns poorly sighted. They bunched together in fear of the dark. One message decoded by a Navajo code talker revealed the enemy's complete battle plan. A massive night assault designed to overwhelm the Marine perimeter through sheer numbers and violence. Puller studied the reports with eyes that had seen 20 years of combat. He recognized what others missed. The Japanese were following a pattern, the same one they'd used in China, in Malaya, in the Philippines. They expected American to react predictably, to fire wildly at shadows, reveal their positions, exhaust their ammunition before the main assault. "Gentlemen," Puller announced at the emergency staff meeting, his gravelly voice cutting through the humid air, "we're going to let them come." The bunker erupted. Major Robert Hall slammed his fist on the map table. "Sir, with respect, that's insane. Let them get close? They'll be in our foxholes before." "They'll be in our killing ground," Puller interrupted. "Every machine gun will be resighted tonight, interlocking fields of fire. We'll stake out range markers. When they come, we'll let them mass in the open, thinking we don't see them." His finger traced lines on the map. "Here, here, and here. Natural funnels. They'll bunch up." Captain Robert Hagan voiced what others were thinking. "Sir, if we're wrong, if they get through, then we'll die like Marines," Puller replied. "But we won't be wrong. Alert all positions. Nobody fires until they hear the signal. Nobody. Let them think the darkness is theirs." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. They were about to gamble everything on their commander's ability to outthink an enemy who had never lost a night battle. Within hours, they would begin transforming their defensive line into something unprecedented. A trap designed to turn Japanese confidence into catastrophe. As darkness fell on October 23rd, the transformation began. What Japanese scouts had observed as a standard defensive line became something entirely different. A killing machine assembled with mathematical precision. Sergeant John Basilone supervised the repositioning of his machine gun section, measuring angles with an engineer's exactitude. "Lower, lower," he instructed his gunners. "I want grazing fire 18 inches off the ground. When they come crawling, they'll crawl right into it." His crews drove stakes into the ground at 25, 50, and 75 yards. Range markers invisible in darkness, but deadly accurate for trained gunners. Each Browning M1917 was positioned to create interlocking fields of fire, what military theorists called beaten zones, areas where bullets from multiple guns would create an inescapable wall of lead. Behind the lines, working parties hauled ammunition forward. Not the standard combat load. Puller had ordered something unprecedented. "I want 30,000 rounds per gun," he'd commanded. Supply officers blanched at the number. That was more ammunition than most positions used in a month. But the ammunition came forward, case after case of 30 caliber rounds, stacked in fighting positions like metallic sandbags. The mortars received similar attention. Captain Harold Thorpe walked his 60mm mortar crews through their firing sequences, dropping illumination rounds into pre-selected coordinates. "When the flares go up," he explained, "you'll have exactly 4 seconds to adjust fire before switching to high explosive. We've registered every approach route. They'll be walking into a steel rain they never saw coming." But the most crucial preparation was psychological. Many of these Marines were barely out of high school, farm boys and factory workers who'd never killed at close range. Gunnery Sergeant Roy Fowler gathered his squad in the fading light. "Tonight you're going to see them close enough to see their faces. You're going to hear them breathing, hear them calling to their mothers when they're hit. You can't hesitate. You can't think of them as men. They're targets, nothing more." Private Eugene Sledge, fresh from boot camp, practiced traversing his rifle sector in complete darkness, memorizing every tree, every depression in the ground. His hands trembled as he loaded ammunition clips. Beside him, a veteran of the August battles offered grim advice. "Don't aim for the head, Boot. Center mass. And when they keep coming after you've hit them, and they will keep coming, you keep squeezing that trigger until they stop moving." Japanese observers, watching from concealed positions, reported none of this activity. Their evening intelligence summary, recovered after the battle, noted with satisfaction, "American positions remain static. No evidence of reinforcement. Enemy soldiers appear nervous, firing at shadows. Estimate 50% ammunition already expended in panic shooting. They had no idea that the sporadic firing was actually Marines testing their range markers, that the nervous movement was the careful positioning of 37 machine guns into a synchronized killing system. The trap was set. All that remained was for the enemy to walk into it with the absolute confidence that darkness was their ally. The mathematics of death were staggering. Each M1917 Browning water-cooled machine gun in Mitchell Paige's sector could sustain 450 to 600 rounds per minute, 10 bullets per second, slicing through the darkness. With proper water cooling and ammunition supply, these weapons could maintain this rate indefinitely. 37 of these guns now covered the Marine perimeter, capable of putting 20,000 rounds per minute into the kill zones Puller had identified. The Japanese approached this wall of potential steel with Type 92 machine guns, competent weapons but limited to 450 rounds per minute maximum and prone to overheating. More critically, Japanese doctrine emphasized ammunition conservation. Their gunners carried 1,000 rounds per gun. The Marines had stockpiled 30,000 rounds per position, a month's supply by Japanese standards, ready to be expended in a single night. Beyond the machine guns lay another American advantage, the M1 Garand rifle. While Japanese infantry carried bolt-action Arisaka rifles, excellent weapons requiring manual operation between each shot, every Marine rifleman wielded a semi-automatic Garand, 8 rounds firing as fast as a man could pull the trigger. In close combat, one Marine could match the firepower of 4 Japanese soldiers. The mortars told a similar story. American 60mm and 80mm tubes had been pre-registered on every approach route, their crews drilling until they could drop rounds within 5 yards of any coordinate in complete darkness. Each mortar position had stockpiled 500 rounds, high explosive, white phosphorus, and illumination. Japanese knee mortars, by contrast, carried limited ammunition and lacked the range to effectively counter battery. But the true revelation lay in the industrial logic behind these numbers. The ammunition choking Marine fighting positions hadn't appeared by magic. It represented American factories running 3 shifts, producing more ammunition in a day than Japanese facilities managed in a week. Liberty ships had carried it across the Pacific, their holds filled with the output of Detroit assembly lines retooled for war. Sergeant Basilone had calculated the killing potential with grim precision. Figure each gun fires 500 rounds a minute sustained. He had explained to his crews, that's a bullet passing through the beaten zone every 100th of a second. Anything moving through that space, crawling, running, doesn't matter, gets hit multiple times before the brain can even register the first impact. The Japanese believed spiritual strength could overcome material disadvantage. They were about to discover that no amount of warrior spirit could defeat the physics of intersecting ballistic trajectories. When 20,000 bullets per minute met human flesh in a confined space, the result wasn't combat. It was mathematics. Cold. Industrial mathematics that reduced brave men to statistics. In 2 hours, 800 Japanese soldiers would enter these equations. The survivors would emerge understanding a terrible truth. They hadn't been defeated by American soldiers. They'd been destroyed by American factories. But wars aren't won by mathematics alone. They're won by men who transcend their own humanity in moments of crisis. When the first Japanese assault wave struck Mitchell Paige's position, industrial planning met individual courage. A grenade explosion killed or wounded his entire gun crew, leaving Paige alone with a red-hot machine gun and hundreds of Japanese soldiers charging directly at him. What happened next defied logic. Paige cradled the burning weapon in his arms, firing from the hip, sweeping the gun back and forth like a gardener with a lethal hose. His Medal of Honor citation would use clinical language. Although seriously wounded, he continued to direct devastating fire into the ranks of the onrushing enemy. What it couldn't capture was Paige's later admission. I became the gun. There was no Mitchell Paige anymore, just this thing that killed. 200 yards away, Japanese Lieutenant Takeda had begun the night writing in his diary by moonlight. The Americans cower in their holes. Tomorrow we will eat breakfast in their positions. His final entry, scrawled as dawn broke, told a different story. It is not fighting. It is a metal storm. Men disappear, not fall, disappear. Pieces of Yamamoto are on my uniform. I cannot find Sergeant Ito at all. The bullets come from everywhere and nowhere. We are fighting machines, not men. Between these extremes of killer and killed moved Navy Corpsman Stanley Golenbiewski, making choices no 20-year-old should face. You learn real quick, he recalled decades later, his voice still catching. Chest wound's probably dead anyway. Gut wound might make it. Head wound, if they're conscious maybe. But when you've got 30 wounded and more, coming every minute... He paused, struggling with memories that never faded. I passed by a Japanese soldier once. Kid, maybe 18, stomach torn open, holding his intestines in with both hands. He looked at me. Right at me. I had morphine. I kept walking. 50 years later. I still see his eyes. The night's most superhuman performance came from Sergeant John Basilone. When ammunition began running low, Basilone stripped off his shirt and began running, not crawling, running upright through fields of fire that had turned Japanese soldiers into mist. He hauled ammunition belts draped around his neck like deadly necklaces, his bare skin blistering from hot brass casings. On one run, he fought his way through Japanese soldiers with a pistol and machete to reach an isolated gun position. It wasn't courage, Basilone insisted years later. Courage means you're scared, but do it anyway. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even there. My body was doing these things, but my mind was somewhere else, somewhere quiet. I killed maybe 24 men that night, close enough to smell their breath. Afterwards, guys called me a hero. But heroes are supposed to feel something. I felt nothing, just the weight of ammunition and the need to feed the guns. By dawn, these individual stories had merged into a collective transformation. American boys who'd never imagined such violence had become efficient killers. Japanese soldiers who'd believed in their spiritual superiority lay in windows 3 deep. Their confidence shattered along with their bodies. The battlefield itself bore witness. Shell casings carpeted the American positions like brass snow, while approaches to the Marine lines were literally paved with enemy dead. The night had transformed everyone it touched. Some, like Paige and Basilone, into legends. Others, like Takeda, into statistics. All into something less and more than human. At 3:00 a.m., the individual stories of courage and horror crystallized into a single, decisive moment. Colonel Sendai's main assault force, 800 of Japan's finest infantry, emerged from the jungle in perfect formation. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had never known defeat in night combat, their officers' swords gleaming in the moonlight. The Marines waited, fingers on triggers, hearts hammering. The Japanese crossed the first range markers, 75 yards, then 50, then 25. Still, the American line remained silent. Japanese officers exchanged glances of triumph. The intelligence reports were correct. The Americans were paralyzed by fear, unable to see their attackers in the darkness. Then, Chesty Puller's flare pistol cracked. The night exploded into artificial day as star shells burst overhead. For a heartbeat, 800 Japanese soldiers stood exposed in the open ground, their eyes wide with the terrible realization that they had walked into a trap. Then, 37 machine guns opened fire simultaneously. What happened next defied description. The first rank of Japanese soldiers didn't fall. They disintegrated. The intersecting fields of fire created a phenomenon Marines would later call the meat grinder. Bodies were literally torn apart by multiple bullet impacts, the hydrostatic shock turning human tissue into red mist. Men in the third rank were killed by bullets that had already passed through 2 bodies. Japanese radio transmissions, intercepted by Marine intelligence, captured the moment of revelation. "We are in a trap," screamed one operator. "Repeat, it is a trap. They waited for us. They can see..." the transmission cut to static. Major Yoshio Tanaka, one of the few Japanese officers to survive, later described the experience. "It was not warfare as we understood it. When our men tried to advance, they vanished. When they tried to retreat, they vanished. The ground itself seemed to be killing us. We could see the American positions now. Continuous muzzle flashes like a solid wall of flame. Our training said to assault through such fire. But how do you assault through a solid object?" The mathematical precision was horrifying. Marine machine gunners traversed their weapons in practiced patterns, their bullets creating overlapping cones of death. The pre-registered mortars dropped rounds with metronome regularity. Within 4 minutes, 240 seconds, the main Japanese assault ceased to exist as a coherent military force. Colonel Sendai, watching from his command post, understood with crystal clarity what had happened. The Americans hadn't been cowering in the darkness. They had been waiting, calculating, preparing. His warriors hadn't been defeated by superior fighting spirit. They had been processed by an industrial killing machine designed specifically for this moment. The tide hadn't just turned, it had revealed that the Japanese never had a chance at all. The destruction of Colonel Sendai's main force triggered a collapse that rippled through the entire Japanese battle plan. Secondary assault waves, moving up through the jungle, encountered survivors fleeing backward, something unthinkable in the Imperial Army. These weren't tactical withdrawals, but panicked flights, soldiers abandoning weapons and wounded comrades, screaming warnings about the metal storm. Lieutenant Kenji Matsuda tried to rally his company for a follow-up assault. Drawing his sword, he shouted the traditional battle cry, "Tenno Heika Banzai!" Only half his men responded. The others remained frozen, having seen what happened to the first wave. When Matsuda led his reduced force forward, they lasted 90 seconds. The survivors who crawled back reported that their officer had been cut in half by machine gun fire before advancing 10 yards. The breakdown in Japanese cohesion was unprecedented. Radio operators reported company commanders refusing orders, demanding artillery support that didn't exist, pleading for permission to withdraw. One intercepted message revealed the depth of psychological shock. The Americans are not human. They are machines that see in the dark. We are not fighting men. We are fighting factories. As dawn broke, the full scope of the carnage became visible. Marine Private Robert Leckie described the scene. "The ground in front of our positions looked like a poorly maintained slaughterhouse. Bodies were stacked in windows where automatic weapons had cut them down. Some piles were 3 deep. The smell. God, the smell. But worse than the bodies were the pieces. Arms, legs, heads, scattered like a child's toys after a tantrum." Japanese survivors huddled in the jungle experienced a collective psychological break. These were soldiers raised on the mythology of Bushido, trained to believe that spiritual power could overcome any material disadvantage. In 4 hours, that worldview had been systematically demolished. Captain Toshiro Sakai, who had written so confidently about American cowardice, spent the dawn hours in catatonic shock, unable to process how his battalion had simply ceased to exist. The implications extended far beyond Guadalcanal. Within weeks, Japanese tactical doctrine began shifting. Training manuals that had emphasized night assault tactics for decades were quietly revised. New editions stressed reconnaissance, artillery preparation, and, most tellingly, the need to respect American firepower. The phrase, "avoid concentrated frontal assaults against prepared positions," appeared for the first time in Japanese military literature. American intelligence noted the change immediately. Night attacks, once the signature of Japanese offensive operations, became increasingly rare. When they did occur, they were probing actions, not the mass charges that had characterized earlier battles. The Japanese had learned, at the cost of 800 lives in a single night, that darkness no longer belonged to them. The lesson was written in blood across a few hundred yards of Guadalcanal jungle. Industrial warfare had no counter in warrior spirit. The age of the Banzai charge was ending, replaced by the grim mathematics of modern combat. The transformation was complete, but its full meaning would take decades to understand. Colonel Sendai's posthumous papers, discovered in 1946, contained a remarkable admission. We were not defeated by the enemy. We were defeated by our own blindness. We saw what we expected to see. Weak Americans dependent on technology. We failed to see that technology, properly employed, is the ultimate expression of warrior skill. The statistics told the story with brutal clarity. Before October 24, 1942, Japanese night attacks in the Pacific achieved an average casualty ratio of 3.1 in their favor. After Guadalcanal, that ratio reversed to 5-1 against them. The Imperial Army's most potent tactical weapon had been neutralized in a single night, not through superior courage, but through superior firepower methodically applied. For the Marines who had done the killing, victory brought little satisfaction. Mitchell Paige rarely spoke of that night for 20 years. When he finally did, his words carried profound ambivalence. People call us heroes, but heroes fight other heroes. That night, we were exterminators. Those Japanese boys, and they were boys just like us, walked into a threshing machine. There's no glory in that, just survival and sadness. John Basilone, touring war bond drives as America's hero, privately struggled with darker truths. In a letter to his brother, he wrote, "They show my picture in theaters and people cheer, but they don't show the Japanese kids I killed with a machete when they got too close to my gun. They don't show how easy it becomes to kill when you turn yourself into a machine. I saved Marine lives that night. I also lost part of my soul." The most profound transformation came in 1968, when Mitchell Paige attended a Marine Corps reunion in San Francisco. There, he met Saburo Yamamoto, who had survived the assault as a 17-year-old private. The two men stared at each other across a hotel conference room. The killer and the almost killed, separated by 26 years and an ocean of experience. "I hated you for so long," Yamamoto said quietly, through a translator. "You destroyed my friends, my beliefs, everything I thought I knew about war. But now I understand. We were both victims of something larger than ourselves. You were trapped by your duty to defend. We were trapped by our refusal to see reality." Paige extended his hand. Yamamoto took it. Two old men who had met as boys in mechanized slaughter found peace in shared understanding. The transformation that began with Japanese confidence and American preparation had evolved into something neither side had expected: mutual respect born from mutual trauma, and the recognition that industrial warfare transformed everyone it touched into both victor and victim. The handshake between Paige and Yamamoto represented more than personal reconciliation. It symbolized a truth that military academies still study today. The most decisive battles are often won before the first shot is fired, in the space between perception and reality. West Point's analysis of the Henderson Field action has become required reading for officer candidates. The case study emphasizes not the courage of individual Marines, though that was extraordinary, but the systematic preparation that turned courage into calculated lethality. Puller's Trap, as it's now known, demonstrates that patience and preparation can transform defensive positions into offensive weapons. The moral question it raises is harder to answer. Is it more humane to warn an enemy away, or to let them approach close enough to ensure their complete destruction? Modern military psychologists studying the battle have identified what they call mechanical dissociation, the psychological state that allowed young Americans to become hyper-efficient killers. Basilone's description of feeling nothing while killing dozens of men at close range exemplifies this phenomenon. It's a survival mechanism that enables ordinary people to commit extraordinary violence, but at profound personal cost. The same mental shift that saves lives in combat can destroy lives in peace. The battle's relevance extends beyond military history. In an age of asymmetric warfare, where technological superiority meets ideological determination, Henderson Field offers sobering lessons. Superior firepower means nothing if improperly employed. Spiritual conviction cannot overcome physical reality. Most critically, underestimating an enemy's capabilities, whether through cultural bias or ideological blindness, remains potentially fatal. But perhaps the deepest lesson lies in the battle's human cost. 800 Japanese soldiers died believing they were superior warriors facing inferior enemies. Dozens of American boys discovered they could kill with industrial efficiency while feeling nothing. Both sides were transformed by the collision between myth and reality, tradition and technology, the individual warrior and the industrial war machine. The jungle has long since reclaimed those few hundred yards of blood-soaked ground, but the questions raised that night remain eternally relevant. What is the balance between tactical brilliance and human horror? How do we prepare soldiers to win while preserving their humanity? And what do we owe those who, in serving their nations, discover capabilities within themselves that peacetime society trains us to abhor? These are the questions that echo through history, as relevant today as they were in the darkness of October 24th, 1942, when American Marines let the enemy come close, then revealed the terrible mathematics of modern war.